a high of 19 degrees. From Global's newsroom, you're up to date.
Day one. It's not day one of work. It starts way before that. It's day one of having the belief you can get there. It's knowing that even though it's been hard, you're ready for what's to come. Start your day one with Barclays Life Skills and join the 10 million we've helped so far. Barclays, make money work for you. 10 million life skills figure independently assured within our 2019 ESG report.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Going to 2 minutes after 9, Monday the 8th of June. Sat opposite me with the suitable distance between us, I stress, is the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir, good to see you again. Just briefly, Alex, you're going to be the first caller. The idea is, of course, you call Keir, but I must ask you, and don't take offence, taking over the Labour Party at any time was always going to be a challenge. I think you'd allow that, the situation in which you found it. Taking it over in these circumstances, a unique challenge. How has it been? I'm sure you are enjoying it. What are your observations? And thank you for coming to the studio.
Look, it is a challenge. There's no doubting that. This has been a particular challenge because obviously we've been in lockdown in weird circumstances, and one of the oddest was my first speech as leader of the Labour Party, which I was hoping to sort of address the nation, as it were, was done in my own living room with a camera and a microphone with me. So we're all getting used to a different way of working, but I'm no different to everybody else in that respect.
Okay, and the challenges?
Oh, the challenge is, look, we just lost an election really badly in December, and there's no beating about the bush. And we didn't lose one election, we lost 4 in a row. So it's a mountain to climb. And, I think trust is everything. And one of the reasons I want to hear from your callers is Indeed. Because I think listening to people is what I need to do as leader of the Labour Party.
And you and your colleagues must be itching to get on the trains and to get out and actually press the flesh and meet these folk. It's important to hear them on LBC, but to actually physically be in front of them as well.
Yeah, I would like to be physically in meetings, talking to people in different communities, but until we can do that, and alongside that is doing sessions like this, yes, which are really, really important.
OK, here we go. Alex in Tandridge, you're the first caller, and you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Alex. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Morning, sir.
So I'm a serving Met officer, and I've worked in the custody department, and I've seen it on many occasions. And the cases can't be exact, but I've seen it where a white suspect will get a caution, and a black suspect will be charged. Theresa May highlighted it in one of her many election campaigns that we've had, that she understood the systemic failures in the judicial system and the slanting towards the prison population of black people. So my question to Sir Keir would be, what would you do to address the institutional racism within the judicial system?
Stay on the line, Alex. Sir Keir.
Alex, look, thanks for raising that. Obviously, I ran the Crown Prosecution Service for 5 years and worked with police forces across the country. And there's no doubt that, steps were taken to try to deal with this. David Lammy, who's in my shadow cabinet, did a report, actually for the Conservative government, into disproportionality in the criminal justice system. And, whether we like it or not, it's there. More black people are stopped and searched, more likely to be in prison, etc. And there were recommendations in David's report which haven't been implemented. And I think we need to do this on a cross-party basis and implement those recommendations.
What sort of recommendations were they, Sir Keir?
They were about much better monitoring of stopping and searching, monitoring what happens in court much more closely, so you can actually test cases against each other, and making sure that we're tracking everything that happened. There's also, I think, the question of training for everybody in the criminal justice system, because a lot of this will be subconscious. And training really helps in that respect. So it was set up by David Cameron, actually. It was a cross-party initiative asking David Lammy to do it. And we need to pick that back up and start implementing those recommendations.
Let's come back to Alex. Alex, a quick response to you, from you to Sir Keir.
I mean, they're all good recommendations, but I mean, how do we address that in the here and now? I mean, we're talking about the next election, which will be 4 or 5 years' time. So do we have to sit and wait for
Alex,
you to come to power for anything to change?
No, Alex, I think that on issues like this, the best way forward is to form a consensus across the political parties, actually, because this shouldn't be something that comes in for 5 years with a particular government, then goes out again. This is the sort of thing that needs to be, absolutely dealt with. And if we can build a consensus, and I'd be open to that, and I know people in the Conservative Party who would be as well, then we should do it. Alex, I can't resist asking you, are you in Tandridge in Surrey?
Yes.
Ah, right, because I was brought up in Hurst Green, which, as you know, is about 2 or 3 miles from where you are now, I should think.
Oh, there we go.
2 local boys done good. Alex, thank you. Can I ask you, I'm going to ask you a different kind of question. You say you're a Met officer. Would you take the knee at a Black Lives Matter demo?
Would I?
Yes, sir.
Depends on the context. If we're talking about a crowd that is throwing bricks and bottles and one-o'clock cocktails or whatever, then no, because that situation won't allow it. If we're talking about a peaceful protest, then yes, I would.
Thanks for your time. Can I put that to you, Sir Keir? Where are you on officers taking the knee, as it's called?
I think Alex got it absolutely spot on there, actually. I think a number of officers want to. Obviously, the violence against them is completely unacceptable, as Commissioner Cressida-Dick said, and nobody think there's anything good about that violence. But officers taking the knee where they want to, where things are peaceful, I think is a very good thing. Should be an individual decision. But
can you police with individual decisions, do you think, Sir
I think there's a lot of discretion in policing, handling a situation, and individual officers that know their communities are best placed, I think, to make those decisions.
Okay. What's your connection with Leeds? Because we're going there now, Sir Keir. I don't know if you have one.
I went to Leeds University and lived in Leeds for 3 years.
Daniel in Leeds.
And I love Leeds. It's one of my favourite cities.
We haven't engineered it, I promise. Daniel in Leeds, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning, Daniel.
Your question, sir.
My company, Arrow, is the official taxi company for 5 UK airports from Newcastle to Bristol. We employ over 100 admin staff with over 1,000 drivers UK-wide. Our main business income is between April to October. As you can imagine, we are already suffering massively. This new government policy will devastate us, as well as all other companies involved in the airline/airports business. That's over 1.7 million people, directly and indirectly. So, Keir, if you were in power, what would you be doing to support the aviation industry and associated companies?
And just to underscore this, of course, the quarantine is the policy that has come in as of today, which many commentators, and it has to be said, many politicians are saying is unworkable. Sir Keir.
Well, Daniel, in direct answer to your question, I'm in favour of the furlough scheme the government's put in place, but I think it needs to now be flexible sector by sector, because some sectors are going to find it much more difficult, and aviation is obviously one of them, particularly with this quarantine. Now, I am constructive with the government and want to support them where I can. I have to say, they do make it difficult for us to support them just at the moment. On quarantine, we've got the situation where, weeks ago, other countries put quarantine in and we didn't. Now, as everybody's lifting it, we're putting it in. Now, so there's a lot of questions to be asked, and I see that there was a leaked memo, I think, from the Home Office this morning saying that they don't really know how they're going to do it.
Cannot work in practice.
It cannot work in practice.
Directly,
I mean,
yeah.
so Daniel, I mean, it is as ever. There's inconsistency and a slowness in the government. That having been said, and just to be fair and so that I don't not misrepresenting the situation, I do think measures are needed for those arriving in the country, and we will support the government in that. But I just think that there's a lot of inconsistency in the approach they've taken here, as in other areas.
What do you mean by measures, then, Sir Keir?
Well, I actually would much prefer to see some sort of testing regime
like
at the airport. Or proper tests for people coming in, or within days of them coming in. I think quarantine is a bit of a blunt instrument. But just to be clear, Daniel, we're not. I mean, in Parliament, we've only got one choice, which is either support the measures or knock them out altogether. And if we knock them out altogether, there wouldn't be anything at the airports, and we're not in favour of that. But I do think it's another example where the public are struggling a bit to follow the logic of the government in some of the measures they're doing. But Daniel, it must be very, very tough in your work at the moment, because, as you say, April to October, critical period, and you can't be working the way you'd like. And
quick response from you, Daniel, to Sir Keir.
I think ultimately this policy shuts down Britain. Is there not knowing? So there's going to be 3 weeks.
Yes.
It's going to be reviewed in 3 weeks' time. How can we possibly plan our business?
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
I mean, it's a very
very tough
point,
for you.
Daniel.
Daniel, good luck. And so just to underscore that, you would have people come in, but they would then have to take a test within a few days of arriving in the country.
I'd quite like the test to be on arrival so that you would know whether someone... I mean, if someone tested positive, then obviously that would be a very...
We don't get it that quickly, though, is it?
Well, this is a challenge we put down to the government. We would like to see a situation where the test was returned within 24 hours. And
Right.
we might have to hold people at the airport until that test result was in. Now, what I've been trying to do in
even
this...
more clumsy than the current one, isn't it? But where are we going to keep them for 24 hours?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure it is more clumsy because at the moment you pass through, you say where you're going to live or where you're going to go to, isolate.
Most likely it's not going to be checked.
Then you get on a bus or a train to get there. I mean, I'm not sure I follow completely the logic of all of that. So there's no system that's brilliant. What I've been trying not to do is to put up rival systems to the government, actually, but to where we can support the government. I do want to support the government because I think it's really important that we do. But as I say, sometimes they make it a bit difficult.
OK, thank you, Daniel. So we've had the Tanridge connection, we've had the Leeds connection.
What are we going
Wembley,
for now?
Sir Keir?
Wembley, well,
You probably watched your football team there, have you?
I have been to Wembley Stadium many times. That's my best connection.
Not your best. Lawrence.
To see England. Actually, my best memory is the Euro '96 at Wembley when Gascoigne did that brilliant overhead. And
right. Yeah,
I was there for that.
You were there for... OK.
But I've also been to see Arsenal and other teams
All right.
many
Lawrence
times.
is there now to put your question to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Lawrence. Morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Nick, and good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi,
Pleasure
Lawrence.
to speak to you. My local MP is Barry Gardner.
Oh, yes.
My question to you is, was it right that he attended the protest, flouting the law against social distancing?
And just to tell all the listeners, that is one of Sir Keir's colleagues, Sir Keir Starmer.
No, he shouldn't have done it. He was wrong to do it. If you're a member of Parliament, you lead by example, and that means we maintain social distancing in accordance with the government's guidance.
Pretty unequivocal. Lawrence?
Yes, totally.
Totally agree. While we're on the... Thank you for that, Lawrence. I've got to get you on the demonstrations on the weekend, if I may, Sir Keir, and you'll know where we're going, I would imagine. The actions by a small number of people in Bristol who decided to topple and then throw into the harbour a statue. Sir Keir.
Yeah, shouldn't have been done in that way. Completely wrong to pull a statue down like that. But stepping back, that statue should have been brought down should have been taken down a long, long time ago. You can't in 21st century Britain have, a slaver on a statue. A statue is there to honour people, and you can't have that in 21st century Britain. That statue should have been brought down properly with consent and put, I would say, in a museum. This was a man who was responsible for 100,000 people being moved from Africa to the Caribbean as slaves, including women and children, who were branded on their chests with the name of the company that he ran. Of the 100,000, 20,000 died en route and they were chucked in the sea. He should not be in a statue in Bristol or anywhere else. He should be in a museum because we need to understand this. That should have been taken down a long time ago.
And what of the police who seemed to watch... Well, they didn't seem... I can say they watched as it happened and did not take action. Was that the correct action from the police?
I was very struck by, I think it was Superintendent Andy Bennett, who was the police officer, the superintendent on the ground, who judged the situation. And he said he was really disappointed by the vandalism and the bringing down of the statue, but he didn't think it was the right thing to intervene because it might make the situation worse. Now, that's a judgment call for the police officer on the ground, and I've worked with the police on the ground, both here and in Northern Ireland, and I respect the decisions that are made on the ground. They're very difficult decisions, but they have to decide, do we intervene and possibly make a situation worse, or don't we? And I was struck by the measure... The calm measure that he had in his voice when he was making what must have been difficult decisions.
But he did allow the lawlessness to continue.
Yeah, and nobody should condone the lawlessness. I mean, if the statute's coming down, it shouldn't come down in that way. There's no question of that.
And the police just stand up. You're saying... And I appreciate we're not there. I'm the Monday morning quarterback. I'm looking at it now. I get it. But shouldn't he have stepped in?
Well, Nick, I've worked with the police on real operations in real time. I've been in the control rooms with senior police officers. Using the intelligence they've got, they have to make difficult judgment calls. And it's always easy after the event to say, well, I wouldn't have done that. So actually I would support the police on the ground in the decisions that they make. Now, I know others will have different views, but I know how difficult it is for police officers to make those sorts of decisions. Had they intervened and the situation got a lot worse, obviously there would be different questions for him. But, he was the superintendent on the spot. He took a judgment call. He knows his community. I'm not going to second guess the decision he made.
Thank you. Samantha in Birmingham. Samantha, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead.
I live in Birmingham under a Labour council. Some of the schools have returned back. Some of the year groups have returned back. But the school that my child goes to is actually doing a phased return. And it seems that Y6 are unable to have them in because they haven't got the facilities, they haven't got the staffing. So what alternatives will be made for those children who will not be attending school? Not because they don't want to go into school, because the schools can't facilitate.
In fairness to Sir Keir, he doesn't run the education system in Birmingham, but a broader question, stay on the line, Samantha, indeed, about the policies regarding schools. Sir Keir.
Yeah, Samantha, I want as many children to go back to school as soon as possible and as soon as it's safe to do so. I think that what the Prime Minister should have done is build a consensus here. I wrote to him actually 2 or 3 weeks ago to say, why don't you build a task force, all the unions, all the local authorities, etc., and get consensus? Because parents are really worried. It's about a 50-50 divide as to whether they've got the confidence to send their children to school. I think it would help if there was a real consensus about this. Most local authorities have said to me, we want to get our children back, and a lot of them have done in the last week or so. And my own children are in school. They've been in school throughout the whole crisis because my wife works in the NHS. So I've seen their schools take more children in the last week or so. So I'm supportive of that, but it's got to be safe. And there are obvious things that make a difference. Of the schools I've spoken to, some say, look, we're a big school, we've got a lot of space, so it's relatively easy. Other schools have said, actually, we're tiny, we haven't got much space, we're going to have to take a bit more time. Other head teachers have said to me, and this just makes sense, some have said, look, we've got a lot of children with particular disabilities, so we just need to take a bit of care about how we do this. So I think, Samantha, in the end, common sense will take us through this, but we do need children back. In answer to your question, where they can't go back for whatever reason, because, of course, even under the government scheme, some children aren't going back, we do need to make sure they've got the very best provision for schooling, because I am really worried about the difference in homeschooling between different children from different backgrounds. So there needs to be a degree of consistency and the best we can possibly offer in the meantime.
You talk about a task force. How constructive have the unions been, in your view, in some instances, Sir Keir?
Well, I've spoken to the unions at length, and they have been talking to Gavin Williamson on a regular basis. And obviously, they've got the concerns of their staff and their members.
But one initial instruction was not to engage. I don't know how constructive that can seem to be.
Well, this is why I actually wrote to the Prime Minister confidentially to say, look, I actually think that it is possible to get people around a table to head in the same direction. There will be tensions, of course there will, but lead from the front, and I will help in that if I can. Now, he didn't take me up on that. I think.
Did he respond?
No, he didn't respond. He said in Prime Minister's questions that he spoke to me on the phone. He's not quite right about that. He did speak to all the opposition leaders in a sort of group meeting, but not about that. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, I genuinely think, and it's not too late now, put a task force up. Let's get everybody around the table, resolve our differences and get on with it. Because in the end, what parents want is to know what's the schooling going to be for my child over the next few weeks and months. And the longer it's left, without being properly resolved, the worse it's going to be for children. It's got to be done safely, of course, but I genuinely think it can be.
All right. Thank you for that. Good luck with your child. Natasha in Hainault, you're on the radio. You're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Natasha.
Oh, hi, Sir Keir.
Hi, Natasha.
I'm 30 years old and I'm shielding at the moment. I work for a health charity and I'm currently on furlough. And I want to know, when this furlough scheme gets wrapped up, what are Labour going to do to support people like me? How are you going to protect those jobs of us who are shielding and make sure we're not discriminated against?
Would you support extended shielding, Sir Keir?
Yeah, I would support extended shielding, extended furlough for those that are shielding, Natasha, because the government's done a good thing with furlough. Again, be constructive. I said I would. Where they've done the right thing, we support them. Furlough was a good thing, but now we need two things, really. A bit of flexibility, because we can see that one size doesn't fit all. Some sectors are going to struggle more than others. We just heard earlier on about aviation, hospitality is another. So we need some flexibility, but then there are gaps, and there are gaps where people are shielding, because there's going to be a cut-off, Natasha, as you may know, of I think the 10th of June, where if you're not shielding by then, you won't come within the furlough scheme. And I think that's wrong, and we'll raise it with the Chancellor and hope he fills that gap, because I don't want people like yourself or others in a similar position not to get the support that you need. So that is a gap that we want to fill.
So how would the extended furloughing work then, Sir Keir?
Well, at the moment, there's a cut-off date of the 10th of June. I would say to Rishi Sunak, look, don't impose that date for those that are shielding or may come to be shielding.
Okay.
So if someone is diagnosed with something on the 15th of June and needs to shield, understandably, they shouldn't fall outside the scheme just because it happens to be the 15th of June. I think it's one of those... I'm hoping, in a constructive way, that once we've pointed it out to the government, they may say, well, actually, that's a fair point, and we'll fill that gap.
OK. Good luck, Natasha. Thank you. Jamie in Dagenham, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Jamie. Morning to you.
Hi, Keir.
Hi, Jamie.
I just want to know, what has happened to this constructive approach on working with the government to defeat the virus that you promised? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm not really seeing it at the moment.
Well, Jamie, I have openly supported the government. When they went into lockdown, I said it was the right thing to do. The government wanted me as leader of the opposition to ask people to follow their guidance all the time. I've done that repeatedly, and I'll ask the whole of the Labour Party to do that. Even now, after some troublesome weeks, my message to everybody listening, every time I am on media, is please follow the government's guidance. I've not sought to undermine it at all. And we voted with the government and not caused divisions in Parliament in order to support them. So the constructive bit is there, but it is also my job to challenge them where I think they've got it wrong. So to take an example, protective equipment in care homes was an area where the government got it wrong. They were far, far too slow and exposed people in a way they shouldn't have been exposed. It's the job of the opposition to point that out, I think, Jamie.
Quick response from you, Jamie.
But so what I'm more thinking about is how we, come out of this and rebuild.
Yeah.
So we've already had the stuff about schools, and for a while it seemed that Labour didn't want schools to go back. And now we see as well about helping small businesses. The government has proposed temporary changes to the Sunday trading laws, and it seems that Labour is now going to oppose that as well. So just like, what going forward is the Labour going to help the government on?
Yeah, Jamie, wherever we think the government's getting it right, we are going to support them and be clear about that. Because I think in a crisis, people don't want to see politicians just falling out because they can. So we will continue to support them where we can. And that's why, actually, on schools, I wrote to the Prime Minister and said, I think I can help you here if you want. Now, as it happens, he didn't reply. But again, that's history now. I'll carry on in the same vein. On Sunday trading, actually, there's a mixture across. This isn't a Labour Party, Tory Party divide. There are many people in the Conservative Party who think that you shouldn't interfere with Sunday trading for various reasons. A day when it isn't the same as everything else, there's obviously the religious element to it. So we'll look at what the government says, but I don't think that one is a Labour-Tory split, actually. It's actually a wider difference of views on that one.
Jamie, thank you. Danielle, coming to you in a moment. Some on the texts, tweets and emails, Sir Keir. This comes from Dave in Hackney. How did you feel when you saw the video played out of George Floyd? To remind you, of course, he was the man who was killed by American police.
Absolutely shocked, as I'm sure everybody was shocked. In particular, just hearing someone almost talking through their own death. It was very, very upsetting, emotionally upsetting. And I'm afraid, I'm sure this is the same for other people, I couldn't take my mind off the face of the officer and the sort of nonchalance, if you like, of what was happening. It was really, really, really chilling. And I think that's why it sparked such a reaction across the world. I mean, it isn't the first, unfortunately. There have been many of these cases in America and other countries. But I was genuinely shocked. And the image, I think, will stick with me. And I'm sure it will stick with many, many people. That combination of a man talking about his last breath in that way and an officer apparently unmoved completely by that. I don't know. What did you think?
No, that was a text. Don't worry.
Don't
worry. No, well, let's come back to another caller. Danielle is in Bournemouth. Danielle, you're on the radio. You're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Danielle.
Great, thank you. A great opportunity to talk to you, Sir Keir.
Hi, Daniel.
Just a little bit of context where I'm coming from in terms of my question. I'm very openly very pro-European and pro-EU. Not that I don't see the deficit in some of the issues around European community, the European Union. However, I studied a Masters in European Law in the late 80s when nobody was interested in what was then EEC law. I campaigned for my local Labour MEP in East London in the 90s. I worked at the European Commission in London and Brussels for 4 years, so I'm very open about my European politics. And I also campaigned, obviously, during the referendum.
I've got to move you to a question, Daniel.
Okay,
Please don't think I'm rude. So many people want to speak to Sir Keir.
I knew you'd do that, Nick. I knew you would. But it's important for me to say that in terms of my party politics, I've been a Labour supporter all my adult life. But I've had a wobble. I struggled during the Corbyn years for many reasons. One of them being that I'm Jewish. I did vote Labour reluctantly in the last election, Sir Keir, and I feel very positive now about the Labour Party. My question, however, to you is, what is the Labour Party now doing about our future relationship with the EU? Are you during the transition period going to hold the government to account? You've done a great job at PMQs. You've made it essential viewing, which is some doing. But are you going to start holding the government to account, realising there are lots of other very important issues, both during the transition and then post-transition, whether you have a deal or not? Are you still going to be talking about Europe and our relationship with the EU? Because don't forget about Labour supporters like me who still care very much. Understanding that we've left.
Daniel, I'm just going to put you so that we're a little tight on time. I'm grateful. Sir Keir.
Daniel, firstly, I must respond on the Jewish comment because we must root out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and I'm absolutely determined to do that. And I hope you will see the beginnings of that have already happened. But I'm determined to do it, which is why one of the first things I did as Labour leader was to make a full apology for anti-Semitism and the way the Labour Party had dealt with it. So I absolutely want to tackle that. On the question of the EU, it's no secret that I voted Remain and campaigned for Remain, but we have left the EU, and therefore it is very important for me to say that the Leave-Remain divide is over. It is gone. And the argument now is about what the future relationship with the EU should look like, and relationships and deals with the rest of the world. But, we argued over Leave-Remain for, 3.5 years. It's over. We have left. And it's very important, I think, for someone like me to acknowledge that.
But what of an
so
extension?
that we can move. Well, the government says it's going to get this deal done within the time available, and we're going to hold them to account on that. The talks are ongoing, and we're watching very closely what's going on, and we will hold them to account on that.
But the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, says we need an extension. Are you on the same page as Mayor Khan?
Well, look, I don't want to end up with no deal, but the government says it will get it done by the end of the negotiating period, and we'll hold them to that.
And if they don't, you would extend?
Well, I don't want no deal. And
so if it were no deal, then you would seek to extend?
Well, one of the consequences of losing an election badly is that it's not my say-so anymore. We're facing an 80-seat majority for Boris Johnson. We can hold him to account, but there's a cost to losing elections, and one of those is you don't make decisions like that.
All right, one quick last question. Thank you, Danielle. David in Hampstead. David, probably the last question. Go ahead briefly if you would, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, hi Nick, great show. Hi Sir Keir.
Hi David.
A question on really what Sir Keir said last. What will it take for you to actually kick someone out of the Labour Party for anti-Semitism? You speak out now and you're saying the supposed right things about anti-Semitism, but for 5 years you campaigned alongside Jeremy Corbyn. You supported Jeremy Corbyn to get Jeremy Corbyn into government. You were standing alongside him. Other MPs left the party, so discussed the anti-Semitism. So, in all honesty, saying the right things now, when you ignored the Jewish community at a time when they were crying out for help, actually now, when it's convenient, you can say something, that's not principled. It's empty words. So, what's changed?
Let's see if he agrees he ignored. I don't know if he'd take that on.
David, I have, within hours of becoming Labour leader, I reached out to various Jewish groups and leaders across the UK and said, would you give me the time of day? Will you meet me? We did that within the first few days of me being Labour leader. We had a very frank discussion, and I told them what I was going to do to root out anti-Semitism.
One of them subsequently said you did more in 6 days than the party had done in 6 years, I think. He used an expression like that, didn't he?
Those communities and those leaders have at least given me enough trust to do what I've got to do. And I had a good discussion with the Chief Rabbi as well. So, David, I'm well aware of the nature and scale of the task. I will be judged by results, of course. We have already made changes to our disciplinary process. There are people being suspended and expelled from the Labour Party. I've asked those Jewish leaders and communities to trust me by my actions and to keep, Jewish Labour Movement have agreed to do training with us and to keep that dialogue open. And so all I ask is that they and you give me the space to show what I will do. And I will kick anti-Semites out of the Labour Party.
And you don't have concerns of the impartiality of the Equality and Human Rights Commission has been expressed by some others?
No, I don't, not in the slightest. I would campaign to have that commission set up, and I want it to go wherever the evidence leads it. It's shocking that it's looking into the Labour Party in the way that it is. It brings shame on the Labour Party, but when they come forward with their report and recommendations, I shall be reading it carefully and implementing them.
A couple of final questions. As you're so senior, you held a very senior position in law in this country, and of course you're a parent. I have to ask you about the developments in the Madeleine McCann case, which seem to underscore the Metropolitan team that was kept in place.
Yes.
Metropolitan Police team.
Yeah, this is such a tragic case, and there have been twists and turns along the way. I hope there's some movement and some development now and some learning now. It's actually not one of the cases that crossed my desk in any shape or form when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. But that notwithstanding, it's one of those cases I think that goes to the heart of everybody. I just hope that there's a way forward. These cases that take so long are so awful.
And a number of people have asked, and I have to ask you this, are you called Keir after Keir Hardie?
Yes, I am.
The first Labour leader.
I can't. I am, but I can. There are a few things I can probably take credit for in my life, but being called Keir isn't one of them because the decision was taken before I had any say over it.
So your parents were quite politically minded?
Yeah, my dad was a great Labour man.
Because you won't mind me saying, quite humble stock. I hope you don't take offence.
Yeah, my dad was a toolmaker, worked in a factory all his life, and my mum was a nurse. So that's, and we were a Labour family.
Yeah. And how is your mum now?
Well, my mum had a very rare illness all her life that meant she spent a long time in high dependency units. She died, unfortunately, just 2 weeks before I was elected as a member of Parliament.
What was the condition she had?
It was called Still's disease. It's a rare. She got it when she was 11. It's where your immune system attacks itself. They discovered steroids helped because she was due to be in a wheelchair by the time she was 20. She was determined to carry on walking, but the steroids and the disease together then, towards the last years of her life, meant that she couldn't walk, she couldn't move her limbs, she couldn't speak. She's never spoken to our children, and in the end she had to have her leg amputated. It was. But
she went on to be a nurse.
She was a
nurse. Young woman,
as a younger woman, she had to stop being a nurse because the condition wouldn't allow it. But as a boy and a teenager, I spent a lot of time in high dependency units with my mum, watching people in the NHS saving her life, which is an incredible thing.
Indeed. I'd never heard of Still's condition before.
It's Still's condition, yeah, Still's disease.
Still very rare.
It's very, very rare.
And they've not found a cure?
No, they haven't found a cure. She was the longest ever steroids patient, so steroids for hair, it meant that she was determined to have children and to walk for as long as possible. Unfortunately, the steroids then took a very, very fierce after a number of years, the consequences were fierce for her and absolutely destroyed her ability to move.
Goodness me, what a story. I've taken you way over time. Apologies if I've kept you from other meetings. Thank you for being here on LBC.
Thanks very much.
Absolute privilege.
See you again.
The first call, Keir, with Sir Keir Starmer here on LBC. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC it was completely wrong for protesters in Bristol to rip down a statue of a 17th century slave trader. The memorial to Edward Colston was toppled and thrown into the harbour during yesterday's anti-racism demonstrations. But taking your calls on LBC, the Labour leader said the statue should have been removed